Hello and welcome to the Internships and MBA recruiting group chat. My name is Meredith Dennis and I am a counselor with Stratus Admissions. I graduated from Northwestern University and I received an MBA in finance from the Stern School of Business. After graduation, I spent 15 years working in investment banking. I then founded a tech company called Project Eve that targeted women reinventing their careers. We reached about 17 million women monthly. And then for the past 3 years, I've become the COO of a global financial search firm called Harrison Rush that specializes in investment banking and private equity recruiting. We recruit analysts all the way up to managing directors all over the world. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists for this afternoon. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing, Meredith. Hey all, I'm Joe Neer. I grew up overseas, came back to the United States for high school and went to the United States Military Academy. I graduated in 2015 and just got out of the Army and am now at London Business School, looking to try and get into consulting or investment banking at the tail end of my MBA career.
Lewis, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure, Meredith. So hi, everyone. I'm Lewis at HEC Paris now. Originally Australian, as you might be able to hear my voice. First cool thing I did was start a small Italian wine business in Australia. And then before the MBA, I was working in a business strategy team in London for a big media and advertising company. A little bit about myself. I obviously love red wine because I started a business in it, but also I love cycling and surfing. So I'm really happy to be here. And hopefully we share some useful insights.
Abhinav,
Yeah, so hi guys, this is Abhinav. I was a software engineer from India before coming to NYU Stern. I worked for Qualcomm, I worked for Adobe. Towards the end of my career at Adobe, I started to go into lead roles and product management roles. And that is what encouraged me to go for my MBA. Here at Stern, I chose Stern because of the exposure in tech as well as finance. And that came true when I interned at a blockchain firm and fintech firm in New York this summer. And now I'm looking to go into product management into some of those kind of firms.
Fantastic. Why don't we start with some of the questions that we've prepared for the panel? So the first question is, and I'll post it right now so everyone can see it. Tell us about the internship and recruiting process this year. Given COVID, I think a lot of things have changed, and maybe you can speak a little bit about your experience, and how things are going. And I can turn it over. Lewis, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. So I interned with Amazon. I think that essentially right at the beginning of the interview process at Amazon at our school was when COVID was happening. Everything was sort of turned upside down, and it was a bit disruptive, to be honest. We thought we would be interviewing face to face, so almost overnight we were put in this situation where we had to do virtual interviewing. Amazon were awesome about it. My experience with the interview process was really you just have to dive in head first and pretend that the computer is someone sitting across the table from you. Act as large as you would otherwise. Through the interview process, I actually came to enjoy it. There's this sense of you can develop a connection with someone through these platforms, and then through the internship itself, it was tricky, to be honest. Onboarding completely remotely. I did an 8-week internship with Amazon. Did my final presentation remotely. Didn't meet or talk to anyone face to face throughout the whole period, and it was tricky. But it's amazing how quickly you get used to it. I think that's my core takeaway was, after the first week, things felt a bit weird. After the second week, it started to feel normal. But halfway through, I was sort of felt ramped up. I was on board. I knew I could reach out to anyone through the online platform. So I'm sure we'll dive into it a little deeper, but all in all, a very different but pretty rewarding experience for me.
Good. Joe or Abhinav, do either of you want to have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, particularly I was particularly recruiting for startups in fintech in New York, and that was a crazy situation because the thing with startups is they recruit mostly at the end of the year, and so it is always a just-in-time recruiting. And COVID hit US in March, and that is the time most of these firms recruit. And all of a sudden, I was talking to a lot of firms who immediately said that they did not have positions open. So that is when I had to like expand my network. I had to reach out more people and figure out where else I can find something. And I was fortunate enough to find actually two internships, one in India and one in US. And the one I did in India was in logistics and e-commerce, and the one that I did in US was your blockchain and fintech company.
Great. Joe?
I actually, I'm not, I'm just, it definitely had an impact on my classmates. I've been behind the power curve, just having to move over during COVID and quarantine and transitioning out of the military, but I don't feel I'm actually behind. Ironically, being social and having those connections, which is very doable in London, is helpful. I'm part of the rugby club, military and business club, and through a lot of social circles in my stream, I've heard, next week, Delta's coming and looking for recruiting. The big three are always coming through and having events. So while it is more competitive, just because of the COVID situation and things are upside down, ironically, it's all who you know. So get out there and make some friends.
That sounds good. Why don't we move to the next question, which is, did any of you participate in the recruiting process last year? And if so, how is it different this year? How has COVID impacted recruiting this year versus last year? I know, from my experience, both when I was in business school and also through recruiting, we've seen a lot of shifts, particularly within financial services in the smaller boutiques and the middle market firms. There were massive layoffs, and then that seemed to open some opportunity for recent hires and recent MBA hires. Certain firms, though, are backing away from those MBA hires and moving more towards laterals. So I'm interested, if you participated last year, what are some of the key differences? Who wants to go first? Because we can't read any body language because we're not all together.
Yeah, I can go first. So the primary difference is last year there were a lot of corporate presentations. They were held in person, so you were really meeting people, and you had a chance to have a informal conversation. You could set up times in their offices. You could go and meet them. You could have coffee chats all day long, and particularly in New York, it was one of the best things that for any MBA student at NYU Stern, that they had access to so many people around. And that has completely flipped this year, and you have to really reach out through LinkedIn, reach out to your personal connections, and you have to set up time, and everybody is sort of having a Zoom fatigue. So a lot of people who are actually willing to give that time to MBA students sometimes do not come up because of the Zoom fatigue that they are already feeling. So that is a little bit there, but a lot of people also understand that this is tough for the MBA students right now. So they are more than helpful in giving you time and giving you guidance on how to go about it.
Thank you. Louis, are you seeing the same thing in Paris?
Yeah, so I didn't do I wasn't in the process last year. Our program sort of 16 months, but I think I actually noticed a difference whilst applying for the internships that I was going for, because COVID sort of happened, after a couple of weeks. So I think that to Abhinav's point, like the mentality of the company's changed a little bit. I think that all the in-person networking events were cancelled, and some of the more sort of bare bones information giving sessions were moved to like Zoom formats. And so everything became slightly more transactional, I suppose. They didn't really, there wasn't as much of an opportunity to get to know someone, but also, to your point as well, I found reaching out to people on LinkedIn was actually probably easier because people knew, like maybe they sensed that, it's a tricky spot, it's a tricky time. People are just a little more sensitive and aware of the challenges that you go through as an MBA student recruiting. So I had really good reception. All the places that I applied, I reached out through LinkedIn, sometimes to absolutely cold contacts, and always got a response. So it was probably overall slightly trickier, but less sort of formal support and more sort of informal support, I think is the transition that I saw.
Joe, do you have anything to add?
Nothing too relevant, no.
I'm just curious, as a follow-up, did the schools support you in any way? Was there any guidance given by the schools of how to reach out during COVID and make these connections?
Yeah, I can jump in. So yes, very much. Like, I think the first thing was, like they thought about skills. Like, how does the skill set need to change? And it has to change very quickly. What are the do's and don'ts of interviewing virtually? Any career sessions that we had from the point of sort of lockdown, I suppose, had like a tailored a section somewhere within it about virtual applications. So that was like the skills side of things. I think the other way that ICC supported was that they didn't let, I can't guarantee this, but I'm pretty sure that they didn't let any companies sort of like drop off the radar because they couldn't come to visit us on campus. They put in, like a safety net to make sure that any sessions that were going to happen still happened. Yes, of course, that there were virtual formats had to change, but I think that the schools, actually certainly they see it as a big challenge for themselves as well. At the end of the day, they want to see us succeed and us get the good jobs that we want, and so they sort of were very much action stations as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to move the discussion along a little bit. And all of you, did you all have online internships, or maybe perhaps you can talk about some of the benefits of an online internship, and also maybe some of the drawbacks. I think the drawbacks are fairly self-evident, but still there must be some benefits to having an online internship. I see Abhinav shaking his head yes. So Abhinav, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is you can work at your convenience. People understand your time, and so I was so with the firm that I was working in New York, I was still in India at the time. So we actually scheduled the meetings in a way that I did not have to wake up late till night. So yeah, and actually people were understanding of that, and that is what I really appreciated. So I had the entire day for myself, and I could work like 3 hours, 4 hours, and I could be productive in the time without any interference of meetings. And at the same time, I could give all my updates. I could come up with new ideas in the brainstorming sessions that were happening in the evening, and I would still go to bed on time. So if you are really disciplined about it, it is easy to maintain a good schedule because you save a lot of time that would have gone into commute.
Good. Did anybody else have an online internship that they want to talk about?
Yeah, I can. So I did an online internship as well. Some of the other benefits I found were that you can really like kind of script any interaction that you have a lot more precisely, because it's obviously far more structured. You have every catch up. It's not going to be in the hallway with someone. It's going to be at a time that's set in advance. And so I felt like for me, there was so many more checkpoints throughout the internship than I would have otherwise thought, because you started to see every meeting as like a really valuable section of time that you needed to get the information or do whatever you needed to do in that interaction. And so I felt like being online actually brought a lot more structure to my internship. And I also feel like, obviously I've only done the one internship, but because it was online, I feel like Amazon made an extra effort to make it structured, to make it very clear where to access things. So I think that was a big benefit from my perspective. Yeah.
Joe, did you have an online internship, or are you a first year? So you're going through the process right now, right? So maybe that'll lead us, maybe you can take the next question, which is, how do you feel online recruiting will impact your job prospects?
Not well. I don't feel like it's definitely more competitive at this point. Companies aren't as inclined to bring on as many people for internships during the summer, especially the consulting ones I'm looking at. However, again, it's like all who you know, and like we were saying, those social interactions. Every time you go to a meeting, you're going somewhere. When you go out in London, you can meet up with at least 6 people around a table, and if you make those connections count, I mean, things come your way. They have a guy in Dubai is coming and asking the Military and Business Club which one of your guys is good and interested in consulting, so I can get an in like that, as opposed to going and to a big school function. I can get in more intimate, coffee talk. So I mean, not all hope is lost, but it's definitely going to be harder to go through the conventional channels like they've done before.
And as a follow-up, how do you think you can showcase yourself in online as a career switcher? Because it's very, one of the things that they used to have pre-COVID were a lot of cocktail receptions and meet and greets and ways that you could showcase yourself in front of your peers. How do you handle yourself in cocktail conversation? How do you handle yourself in various other social functions? So it wasn't just an interview. And now that that's gone and that's been removed, I'm curious how people feel about how that might impact their recruiting.
All you can do is just make that online session count that much more, make your stories and practice your interviews, it matters 5 times as much now. And again, if people know you can vouch for your work and the work at school, at least, or can tell their friends that have, graduated a year ahead that, hey, I know your company's looking for people. This guy might be interesting to you. Whatever you can do. But yeah, again, the basics, practice and rehearse your interviews.
Lewis,
I think while the formal sort of networking sort of cocktail evening events maybe are on hold, I think that for me, I've always had the most success with reaching out directly to someone anyway, and so whether it's through the alumni network, really lean on your alumni network. And as I said, if you have a good story and you have a good, you can convey a very succinct message through, say, LinkedIn, or if you get someone's email address. I think a lot of people are surprised at how willing to help people are when someone else shows initiative. And so all you need to think is, companies are still hiring. Maybe they're not hiring as many people. So you just need to make sure that you're above the threshold. You're above the cut. And it can really be something as simple as having an initial conversation with someone through LinkedIn who you think you're gonna, you have something in common with, or they went to your school, or they finished an MBA in the same city. And I feel like a lot of these sort of back channels become exceedingly more important. And they really, 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 they benefit people who are really proactive, because, the people who only rely on the cocktail evenings or the networking, if you have the sort of back channel skills, you're at a competitive advantage over, in this sort of climate. So yeah, I think that those back channels become more important to be clear. Yeah.
Good. Abhinav?
I just want to say that the experience that other industries are having, this has been the general experience when recruiting for tech. So people who have already recruited for tech are familiar with the whole experience of reaching out to people on LinkedIn, setting up video chats, and trying to know people. So tech industry is more suited for or more adapted to this format. So it's easier because people are more familiar with it. So if you are recruiting in tech, go ahead and do whatever these Joe and Lewis just told you, and it's easy. It's slightly easy. You just have to figure out the companies that are actually recruiting right now.
So one thing I can say is that LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful tool for recruiting. And the sooner you get on LinkedIn and the sooner you navigate and reach out to people, the more productive I think your job search will be. LinkedIn is not only great for reaching out to people, but I know also posting online. So if you follow certain people or follow certain human resources, professionals or executives within the firms that you want, they'll often post their positions on LinkedIn, which will pop up in your feed. So I know, for Harrison Rush, we post, today alone, I posted six different roles within investment banking that will not go on to Monster or anywhere else. It's not even in the job search. I have a network of 10 to 12,000 people that follow me. And so I'll just wind up having people LinkedIn me all day saying, hey, what about this job? And I'm like, you're too junior, you're too senior, I'll keep you in this file. Just so it's not just an informational interview. It also allows you to track actual roles that the companies are recruiting for that can give you some insight into what they're looking for in terms of qualifications, background, cultural fit, all of those different things. So I think LinkedIn is a wonderful tool that, especially during COVID, that MBA students should take advantage of. As a follow-up, I'm going to ask, not you personally, but how are your peers feeling about recruiting this year? How is what's the general sentiment amongst your friends and your peers and your cohorts and your groups, clusters, different things? So, Joe, do you want to go first?
A little more competitive, but generally not. We're not too worried about it. I mean, the companies are still reaching out, even though they're saying they have less slots, they're still interested in coming to LBS to pick up MBA students. And again, if you keep working, you're in these different social groups and circles or clubs on campus, you're going to have other offers on the side as well if you build up a LinkedIn profile. So, yeah, I'm concerned, but not alarmingly so, would be my summary.
I remember everybody was super freaked out about getting an internship and super freaked about getting the offer and getting the job. So I can only imagine that COVID has exacerbated everybody's freak out. And I just wanted to know if anybody, is seeing that. How are you supporting your the other students, your friends, just generally what the sentiment is. Have enough.
Yeah, so everybody is definitely concerned, but not too concerned. But especially the people who already have an offer, they are also trying to find out job prospects, their connections, and leveraging them to other classmates. So we have
that's nice.
Yeah, helping out. We have several groups that are actually formed by people who have already signed their offers, and they are just looking online for different job offers, and they're talking to their peers, the connections that they made in their internships, and asking around for their classmates. And this is how we are trying to support each other.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. Lewis, are you seeing the same amongst your classmates?
Yeah. There's a so amongst my classmates, there's a cohort that finishes at the end of this year, and then sort of one that finishes in about a third of the way through next year. The ones that are finishing at the end of this year are definitely panicking. The ones who don't have anything, they're sort of panicking. But actually, it's quite a unique place because we're in France, but people go to the Middle East, to Asia, to all throughout Europe. So it's amazing. I think we've got like I don't even know how many different nationalities we have in our cohort, and people are really sort of connecting back to their roots, as in like if they came out from Brazil, then they'll be really tapped into opportunities in Brazil or Germany or and so I think that like that's a good way that we're supporting each other. Obviously, as the other guys said, like if you've been through if you've got an offer and you can introduce someone, then we're all doing that. But also just keeping our sort of our global approach. So if we know that there's like more opportunities of companies in Germany, say that they take English speaking people. So sort of reaching back to the roots and trying to sort of expand the search field collectively, I think is what I can see.
Thank you. And then to kind of build on that, which geographies are you thinking of recruiting in? Just because COVID has obviously impacted the United States tremendously, and other geographies it's impacted less. And so I'm curious, which geographies are you thinking of recruiting in? Has COVID impacted those geographies? Which geographies are your peers thinking of recruiting in? So who wants to answer first? Luke.
I can go again. I know I know that I'm going to London, so I'm going to London, and so I know that there's still opportunities there. I'm seeing just through sort of like anecdotal evidence from the consulting club, I think that there's quite a bit of consulting opportunity in the Middle East at the moment as well. I think that there's quite a bit of opportunity there. I know a whole bunch of guys from my cohort went to Germany to do an Amazon internship as well. So it looks sprinkled throughout Europe and the Middle East. I think that there's still opportunity. Haven't heard of anyone from RCC going recruiting into the US, but I think that there's still opportunities in Europe for sure. Yeah.
As a follow-up, I'm also going to ask you to consider the H-1B issue in the United States that, was recently put into place. So I'm curious how that might impact recruiting in the United States. So not just COVID, but also the H-1B. I've seen a tremendous amount of pullback in financial services, saying, we're not terribly interested in sponsorships anymore, even TN visas out of Canada. Originally, some of the Japanese banks were open to the idea. Some of the big three were open. And over the last couple of months, we've seen a pullback on, we really don't want to touch H-1Bs until the situation has been resolved. So I'm curious, if that might actually also be impacting geography as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And like the talent pool as well from US MBAs is huge, right? So I suppose the supply of quality candidates is still there, even if you don't have to look outside the geographies. But it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't know how many people from RGC go to the States, but I would imagine that both COVID and this H-1B, then it makes life a little tougher. But my eyes have been open to what opportunities there actually are in Europe as well. I'm only English speaking. Like I couldn't work professionally in another language. But it's not just London that's open to me. That there's companies that will take English speaking MBAs throughout Europe. A lot of my cohort go to Luxembourg. Like that's a big hub for tech and I think for increasingly for fund management as well. So it's funny where you find these opportunities, and I think the European schools are sort of have to we don't have as big a market as the US, so we have to sort of spread the effort across some different geographies, but that there's some good opportunities there.
Mm-hmm. Abhinav, are you seeing the same thing, or where are you recruiting? Because that's very interesting, because you mentioned that you had an internship in both New York and also in India, and you're extern. And so I'm curious how that might impact you, both COVID and the H-1B issue, in terms of figuring out your geography. Is it something that's on your mind, something that's on your peers' mind?
Yeah, so it's definitely on everybody's mind that where do we want to recruit, and most people are recruiting in the US, in Canada, or they are looking at Middle East. So these are like three.
That's
Yeah,
for the Middle East. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, these are the three geographies most people are looking at. But the benefit with US MBA, most US MBAs are now STEM approved. So after you graduate, you have 3 more years to work. Up to you get an extension every 1 year. So you have 3 chances to get an H-1B. So people are actually interested in staying in US and taking their chances for those 3 years. Earlier, that was only for the MS degree or special, like the actual STEM degrees. Now, MBAs are also considered STEM.
Oh,
So,
interesting. So you don't have to have an H-1B. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I didn't know that. So if you stay in tech, you don't need an H-1B to stay?
no. So how H-1B works is your firm needs to verify that you work in a STEM designated role, and your degree needs to be STEM approved. So right now, I think pretty much uh, 40, maybe 40 or 50 odd schools have STEM approved MBAs. So what you get is when you go to a job that participates in E-Verify, which is a program to state that you support verification of your roles as STEM approved roles, and when you go to such a firm, every year you can get an extension for 1 more year to stay in the US up to 3 years. So these 3 years you can keep applying for your H-1B visa, and even in the end, if after 3 years you do not have an H-1B, you have enough experience to basically find a job in some other geography.
So are you going to be recruiting in New York? Or are you going to be recruiting in India? Or are you going to be recruiting in the Middle East with everybody else?
No. No, I'm going to recruit in India primarily. Sorry, in US, and my backup is India.
Okay.
And I might just switch course, because right now I'm on the East Coast. I might go and recruit on the West Coast.
Because
That
of the weather? No, I'm joking.
it may be because of the weather, but yeah, no. So the thing is, New York has a vibrant fintech community, fintech startup experience, but there's a lot of cutting edge technology work going on the West Coast, and there are a lot more opportunities, to be said plainly, in the tech space. So that is the reason I also want to look at the West Coast with a wider eye and see what roles are available on the West Coast.
Okay. Joe, where are you going to be recruiting?
I'd like to get a job in Southeast Asia down the line, so that's my dream. But quite frankly, at LBS, it seems like a third of the offers or stuff coming across the table are in London, a third from Dubai in the Middle East, and then a third of Southeast Asia and the rest of Europe. And again, the only offers the talks we've been having with companies from the States they've not been willing to sponsor anybody, like you alluded to. So I would like to do Southeast Asia. If not, though, Dubai is, go travel, see another part of the world for summer.
And then are most of your peers recruiting? Where are they recruiting?
Ideally, they all want to stay in London. That's where the most competitive spot. As everyone here generally speaks English, and with the big three, they want to keep you at a country you can actually speak the language proficient. Very the fallback, well, not the fallback, but the second tier option is the Middle East for all of them. All the Americans are generally trying to go back to America because now with the whole, with the lack of this willingness to sponsor, now that just opens the market up for all of us. But I don't want to go back to the States just yet.
Terrific. Thank you for such thoughtful answers. So we have a couple of questions that have come from, we have about 96 people on the call right now, which is pretty exciting. And here's a question that just came in. It says, my post-MBA goal is a niche sector and not many companies come on campus. How do I network and get an internship or job?
So my advice would be, do research, go to LinkedIn, find a sort of some sort of link, like try to find some sort of someone who works at the company who, I don't know, grew up in the same city as you, or went to, did the same undergrad degree as you, or something like this. But it can't be like a blanket approach. It has to be very specific, very targeted. Find someone who you think would be receptive to your to your situation and your strengths, and then reach out to them and ask them. I don't have any sort of hard data to back this up, but I've always found more success when you're humble about it. You're asking someone for help. You're not proclaiming that you're going to be the best hire of 2021 for them. I think people respond well to humility, and if you just ask for help, show genuine interest, through those back channels. If it's a niche sector, then I think that's your best bet, and lean on the alumni network. If you're through an MBA, you'll be incredibly surprised at where people end up after doing an MBA. Niche sectors all over the place. So that's a big draw card actually for an MBA.
Thank you, Louis. I have another question from the people who have joined, and I think Abhinav is probably the best one to answer this. Any advice on how to get an internship job coming from a typical engineering background?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is you need to figure out what does the job require, and how does it relate to what you have already done. So I'm sure if you guys haven't heard of it in the audience, like you need to highlight the transferable skills. So what you have done in your previous job, previous role, you need to highlight what are the best suited skills that you have earned that can be transferred to your new job that you are applying to. And that is what you start highlighting in your stories, in your cover letters, in your resume, in your networking sessions. And you need to show some genuine interest in the area that you are trying to move to. And you need to have a story why you need to show some kind of experience, some kind of, maybe a little bit of an internship in the particular area, maybe a little bit of personal effort in trying to work in that area. You need to highlight those things. And it's not as easy as having a complete background in the area you are recruiting, but it does open doors for you if you just do this much of research and effort in your stories.
Thank you. So I have a question that I'm trying to erase the person's name. Would you recommend taking up an MBA at a school that isn't in the geography you'd eventually want to work in? Because all of you seem to be, recruiting for, a little bit, in Europe or in Dubai or possibly on the West Coast, which is obviously different than New York. So I kind of defer back to you. When I went to NYU, I wound up just staying in New York and working in investment banking in New York because I networked there. It was pretty easy for me, and I was born and raised in Manhattan, so I didn't really travel that far. But it seems that the three of you have decided to expand, your vision based on where you would potentially work, not dependent on where you go to school. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, like the It's a really interesting question because on one side, you have to think about choosing a school that fits in terms of what their strengths as a school are, the vibe of the cohort. You get onto campus, see if you sort of gel with the professors, the other students who are there. The schools do have very different feels when you go and talk to the cohort. So I think that's super important. But if I suppose my quick summary would be, if you want to work in like a real hub like London, I really do think it's easier to be in that geography. And I don't know much about the States, but I would say, obviously if you want to work there, then you should probably do an MBA there as well. But if it's like a region, like I'd like to work in Southeast Asia, doing a reputable MBA in the US or Europe, I think we have plenty of channels through to other markets. So I would say, yeah, if it's a well-known hub, or if the big three or the investment banks only take candidates or take most of their candidates from the immediate geography, like in London, then it's important. Otherwise, I would focus on a good match in terms of the reputation of the school, the strengths of the school, and the shape of the cohort.
That makes sense. I have another question let me hide that question. Another question that came up specifically was surrounding investment banking recruiting. Perhaps Joe, you can address this. They're very interested in understanding or better understanding the investment banking recruiting process this year. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit about your recruiting process this year for investment banking.
I unfortunately was a little slow. I had just come back from Iraq and then out processed in the Army and then flew here. I was behind the curve. Before you even show up on campus, already reach out and get a hold of the Career Center or whatever respective programs they have and figure out the timeline, because I completely missed my investment banking window for recruitment. So that's why I'm going for a consulting one this summer. So yeah, with investment banking, if that's what you're intending to do, get smart about it before you even show up to campus.
Do you know what the recruiting process was, and even though you missed it, or no?
No, by second I asked, they said you missed that, and I was like, then I don't care, and I went on to consulting. Just move on to the next one.
Okay. From my understanding, investment banking will typically do a 13-person interview schedule on campus. They'll invite people for interviews. So what my understanding of what happens is, if you can pre-network in advance, your whole goal originally is to make it onto that short list. And if you make it, and the best way to make it onto that short list, I think both Lewis and Abhinav have mentioned, is probably via LinkedIn, reaching out, finding who is your school captain for the bank or the consulting firm that whoever is doing that is really important. So if you can reach out to that school captain in advance to make it onto that short list, that 13-person short list, that would be wonderful. Most of the banks have recruiting teams by school. I think this is not just for investment banking, but also for consulting, also for kind of the larger companies. Less so, I think, Abhinav, for the startups. But if you can target the people who are coming to campus, who have been on that recruiting team via LinkedIn, and somehow get some form of informational interview in advance of them prepping that interview schedule, I think that is probably your best bet to make it onto that short list. And then from there, they'll always take a couple of candidates and they'll give offers to them. Those offers are also contingent on how many other offers that person has. So I've also been in situations where I've led the NYU team at different banks. I've been on the NYU team at different banks, and sometimes everybody takes another offer, and we'll go back to people who have been turned down the first time. The other thing I've had happen, which is a really interesting and unique situation, is I've had during my 15 years, I've had people call me up and say, you know what, I didn't have a really great interview. I know I can do better. I know I can be better. And I've given them a second chance. I don't think it always works, but on occasion, if you have a a really good story and you're like, look, I blew that one and I think I can really do better. I really want to work here. That also works. So at least it did a while ago. So I think for, my understanding of the investment banking process is, or for any process, that being said, the more you front end your informationals, the more you target who is coming to campus, who's prepping that list. If you can do a little reconnaissance through second year, perhaps a second year or a recent grad who works at the bank is probably on that team. So to reach out to them and somehow get to the team captain, that way you solidify your place on that list, and at least it gives you the best shot of getting it and an opportunity. So it's not just networking for networking's sake. It's networking to position yourself to get an interview, to then put your best foot forward, to then secure that offer that you really, really want. That's just kind of, at least I think it still works that way. And if nothing else, you're going to get smarter on investment banking, on the sectors that you want to go into. Make sure you have that down pat. So if you have a story, I worked at Marvel Comics, at Marvel Entertainment. I worked in business development. I went back to Stern, and then I wanted to go into TMT in investment banking. And so my story was pretty consistent. And when I reached out at Network, which can now be done via LinkedIn, I reached out to media and telecom investment bankers who were recent grads. I worked my way up to the team captain because I was a romantic poetry major, and they were a little concerned that I couldn't add. And so I somehow finagled myself onto the list and eventually wound up at Bear Stearns. So, in M&A. So there's a lot of things you can do with LinkedIn, and a lot of things. And I think it's not only applicable in investment banking, but also applicable within other industries as well. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to do a quick scan and make sure I didn't. And then I think we're coming to the end, but maybe we have one more question. Let's see. Here's another. Would you recommend a pre-MBA internship if I'm looking to switch into tech from social impact consulting? I feel like I don't really know what a pre-MBA internship is. Something new. Maybe Abhinav,
I mean, I've heard about this. Like some people like to invest some time gaining some experience in areas that they want to recruit later in. But it does add something to your resume. But if it doesn't add to your story, I don't see how that helps. Like it should have some kind of an impact, some kind of a learning experience to add to your story. If it's just internship for the internship's sake, I'm not sure if it adds too much.
Great, thank you. Well, I wanted to thank everybody who joined us today for our internships and MBA recruiting session. I want to thank Joe, Lewis, and Abhinav for their time. I thought it was very helpful, and I hope that everybody found the session as useful and helpful and entertaining as I did. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you very much, Meredith.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.